If you're not getting bites, your first instinct is probably to open the tackle box and tie on a different lure. That feels productive, but it can turn into 20 minutes of not tying without teaching you anything. Before you change the lure, change the way you're retrieving it. A small adjustment in speed, depth, pause, or casting angle can make the same lure look like a completely different meal. Here's the simple rule you're going to use. Change the retrieve when the lure can reach the fish and move correctly, but isn't triggering a strike. Change the lure when it physically can't do the job. By the end, you'll have a short retrieve test you can run at any promising spot before you reach for the tackle box. A retrieve is everything that happens after your lure lands. It includes how long you let it sink, how quickly you reel, whether you pause, and the direction the lure travels. Those choices control what the fish actually sees. One paddle tail can look like a bait fish cruising normally, fleeing in panic, or dropping like an injured meal. So a fish ignoring one retrieve doesn't prove it dislikes the lure. It may simply be at the wrong depth or moving the wrong way. For this process, use a lure that's easy to cast and easy to feel. A small paddle tail swim bait is a good example, but an inline spinner, spinnerbait, or shallow crankbait can work too. Choose something appropriate for the fish, water, and local regulations. More importantly, choose something that can move through the area without snagging on every cast. Before you cast toward fish, test the lure beside the bank or kayak. Lower it into clear water where you can see it, then reel slowly. Watch for the speed where the tail begins kicking, the blade starts turning, or the crankbait begins wobbling. The lure should track upright instead of rolling onto its side. That slowest working speed is your baseline. Remember what it feels like through the rod handle, because you'll use it as your starting point. If the lure won't move correctly, even in this little test, fix that first. It may be tangled around the line, carrying a strand of grass, rigged crooked, or moving too slowly. A fouled lure can look dead or spin unnaturally. Changing the retrieve won't help until the lure is clean and running properly. Next, make sure you're actually fishing where a fish might be. A perfect retrieve through empty water is still an empty cast. Look for one specific feature, not just a large area that seems fishy. It could be the shady corner of a dock, the outside edge of a weed bed, the end of a fallen branch, or the line where fast river water meets a slower pocket. From the bank, make your first cast roughly parallel to shore. Fish often use the first depth change, shade line, or strip of vegetation along that edge. After that, fan a few casts farther out. From a kayak, stay back from the target. You want enough room to cast beyond the cover and bring the lure past it. If you float directly over the spot, you may scare the fish or pull the lure away from them too quickly. Your first real test is a steady retrieve. Cast beyond the feature so the lure is already moving correctly when it reaches the important water. Let it settle briefly, then reel at the baseline speed you tested beside you. Point the rod generally toward the lure, with the tip low enough that you can maintain light tension. You want to feel a blade turning, a tail kicking, or the lure touching cover, but you don't want to drag it like it's attached to a rope. Make several casts you can repeat. Beginners often speed up, slow down, twitch, and pause several times during one cast. That might catch a fish, but if it does, you won't know what worked. At first, consistency is more useful than creativity. Give the fish one clear presentation, then change one control at a time. The first control to change is speed. Make a few casts at your normal pace, then make the next few noticeably slower. Slow enough that you can feel the difference, but not so slow that the lure stops working. A spinner blade still needs to turn, and a paddle tail still needs to kick. After that, try a clearly faster retrieve. Use the water to help choose which direction to test first. If the water is cold, the fish have been heavily pressured, or nothing is visibly chasing, slow down first. If baitfish are scattering near the surface or you see predators chasing them, speed up and keep the lure higher. These aren't guarantees. They're simply sensible starting points. Pay attention to wind and current, because the reel handle doesn't tell the whole story. A strong crosswind can bow your line and pull the lure faster than it feels. Current can make a lure race when it moves downstream or resist when it moves upstream. Watch the line angle and use the vibration in the rod to judge what the lure is actually doing. A following fish is one of your best clues. If a fish follows the lure but turns away, don't immediately replace it. The lure already did the difficult part. It got noticed and made the fish move. On the next cast, repeat the same path, but make one triggering change. Speed up as the lure reaches the fish, or stop briefly and let it fall. A follower usually means you're close. It often needs a better final move, not a completely different bait. If speed doesn't solve the problem, test depth. This is where many beginners lose contact with the fish because they watch the surface and forget to picture the lure underwater. A fish sitting near the bottom may never notice a lure passing several feet above it. A suspended fish may ignore something dragging underneath. With a sinking lure, use a countdown. On the first cast, let it fall while you count 1001, 1002, 1003, and then start reeling. On the next cast, add a few counts. Keep the retrieve speed the same so depth is the only change. If the lure begins ticking the bottom or collecting weeds, shorten the count slightly. You've now created a repeatable depth setting without changing gear. Watch the line during the fall. If it jumps, moves sideways, or stops sinking earlier than expected, a fish may have taken the lure. Reel until the line becomes firm, then sweep the rod back smoothly. Don't swing hard while several feet of loose line are floating on the water. That usually moves the slack instead of driving the hook. The lure's contact also tells you what's below. A crisp tick may be rock or wood. A heavy, mushy pull often means weeds. If the lure feels different, bring it in and check it. One small strand of grass can pin a paddle tail against the hook or stop a spinner blade. When that happens, you don't have a lure problem or a retrieve problem. You have a dirty lure. Once your speed and depth are reasonable, change the rhythm. Start by adding one pause and place it beside something meaningful. Pause as the lure passes a dock post, reaches the tip of a weed point, crosses a shadow line, or leaves a shallow shelf. Don't sprinkle random pauses through open water. You want the lure to hesitate where a fish is likely to be watching. What happens during the pause depends on the lure. A soft plastic may fall beside the cover. A floating crankbait may rise over weeds or back away from a branch. A suspended lure may hover almost in place. Learn that behavior by watching the lure close to you. Then, you'll know what the fish sees when it disappears underwater. Stay ready during the pause. Many strikes don't feel like a dramatic hit. You may see the line twitch, or the lure may simply feel heavier when you start reeling again. If something feels different, reel down and apply steady pressure. You can also try a simple pull and pause retrieve. Move the lure with a short sweep of the rod, stop, and use the reel only to collect the loose line. The rod moves the lure, the reel manages the slack. Keep the sweep small. A common beginner mistake is jerking so hard that the lure rockets several feet away from a fish that was inspecting it. Before you change lures, change your casting angle. This is the adjustment beginners overlook most often, and sometimes it matters more than speed. The same lure can appear natural from one direction and awkward from another. In a river, cast slightly upstream and let the lure drift toward the boundary between fast and slow water. Reel just fast enough to keep it working as it swings through that seam. A cast straight downstream can make the current pull too hard, lifting the lure and making it race unnaturally. Around weeds, bring the lure along the clean edge instead of straight through the thickest section. Near a dock, move a few steps so your retrieve passes 2 or 3 posts instead of missing them. Changing your position by a few feet may create a completely new presentation without changing anything on the line. It can keep the lure in the strike zone longer, bring it past the shaded side of cover, or make it move with the current instead of fighting it. Now look for evidence that you're getting closer. A bite is obvious, but it isn't the only useful signal. A follower, flash, swirl, line twitch, or patch of scattering bait tells you something attracted attention. Feeling the lure touch cover without becoming buried is also encouraging because you're reaching the place where fish can hide. Whenever you get one of those clues, repeat the cast before changing anything else. Aim at the same landmark. Use the same sink count, speed, and angle. Fish often hold in small groups, and the next fish may commit. If you immediately experiment again, you can lose the useful pattern you just found. So when should you finally change the lure? Change it when it can't perform one of 3 basic jobs: reach the fish, move cleanly through the area, or give the fish a reasonable chance to notice it. If a shallow crankbait can't reach fish holding near the bottom, use something that dives or sinks deeper. If an exposed hook returns covered in grass every cast, switch to a weedless option. If fish are feeding on very small bait and your lure is dramatically larger, downsize. If muddy water makes a quiet, subtle lure difficult to locate, choose more vibration or stronger contrast. Those are functional changes. Each one solves a problem you actually observed. Avoid changing both the lure and retrieve at the same time. If you replace a spinner with a soft plastic and also slow down, a bite won't tell you whether the fish preferred the new lure or the slower movement. Keep one part of the test stable whenever possible. Also, don't spend forever testing one spot. Controlled experimentation is useful only when fish are likely to be there. Give a good target a fair group of casts, then move to the next dock corner, weed point, shade pocket, or current break. Finding active fish is usually more important than choosing the perfect brand, color, or price. Here's your complete retrieve first test. Choose one visible fish holding feature. Confirm that the lure is clean and moves correctly. Cast beyond the feature and begin with a steady baseline retrieve. Test noticeably slower, then faster. Try another depth with a repeatable sink count. Add one pause beside the most important cover. Finally, change your position and retrieve through the target from another angle. If you get a follow, bump, swirl, or bite, repeat that exact version. If you work through the sequence at several promising targets without any sign of interest, identify the physical problem and choose a lure that solves it. On your next trip, carry only a few suitable lures so the tackle box doesn't become a distraction. Your goal isn't to discover whether one lure is good or bad. Your goal is to ask a better question. What job isn't being done? If the lure reaches the fish and moves correctly, adjust the retrieve. If it can't reach the zone, stay clean, or be noticed, change the lure. Fix the smallest problem first, and every cast will start teaching you something.